In the heart of West Africa, beneath the blazing sun and the dust-laden winds of the Sahel, a quiet rebellion once grew into a storm. It began with a man who was never meant to lead. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had not been born into wealth nor groomed in the halls of politics. He was molded instead by war, shaped in the furnace of the northern front lines where Burkina Faso's soldiers fought a brutal, largely forgotten war against insurgents, jihadists, and shadows armed with rifles and foreign backing. Traoré was a young artillery officer, stationed far from the comforts of Ouagadougou. In the north, villages vanished overnight. Men were slaughtered, children orphaned, and entire districts bled away. The government sent orders, the soldiers buried their own. He watched as commanders made promises they could not keep, as international forces flew overhead and did little, as French troops came and went, speaking the language of counter-terrorism, while leaving the same smoldering ruins behind. The people began to whisper of betrayal, and those whispers echoed among the ranks of the military, among young officers who bled with the people, who saw the state not just as corrupt, but broken. In September 2022, the dam burst. Paul-Henri Damiba, himself a coup leader who had ousted an elected president only months prior, was accused of failing to stop the bloodshed. His forces had made little headway in the north. Rumors of his private dealings with foreign governments, particularly France, began to circulate. Supplies failed to reach the front. Morale crumbled. And then, Captain Traoré made his move. It was swift, surgical. Within 24 hours, Damiba was gone. Traoré appeared on television, flanked by fatigues and a single national flag. He was calm, direct. Burkina Faso, he said, had suffered enough. The transitional government would be reorganized. A new direction was needed, one that no longer bowed to the whims of foreign powers. Few knew him then. Fewer still understood what had truly happened behind the scenes. But the people cheered. In a nation used to coups, Traoré's youth and revolutionary tone struck a nerve. He declared that Burkina Faso would fight for its full independence, militarily, economically, and diplomatically. He expelled French forces within months. He welcomed Russian representatives, signed defense agreements with Moscow, and strengthened ties with fellow military-led states, Mali and Niger. The alliance of Sahel states, the AES bloc, was born under his watch. He wore no medals. He lived modestly. When he traveled, he often rode in simple convoys, flanked not by luxurious motorcades, but weathered pickup trucks and Kalashnikov-bearing guards. But revolutions create enemies, especially the kind that cut off the hands of former kings. Traoré's policies dismantled networks that had grown fat on foreign contracts, NGO budgets, and military aid. His purge of internal corruption disrupted a web that had, for decades, connected senior officers, politicians, businessmen, and embassies. He had broken the unspoken rule. He didn't just seize power, he used it. And somewhere in the dark, a decision was made. He had to go. The first attempt was subtle. Traoré had developed a habit of making unannounced visits to military outposts. He would arrive without fanfare, inspect morale, eat with the soldiers, and leave. During one such visit, his convoy was scheduled to pass through a rural checkpoint near Kaya. But at the last minute, an intelligence report reached the capital. The road ahead had been mined. The device was sophisticated, not the work of roaming jihadists or desperate bandits. It had been placed recently, in a spot only a handful of people knew Traoré would cross. The convoy was rerouted. An engineering unit swept the path. They found 2 IEDs wired to detonate in sequence, a classic assassination layout designed to catch the rear vehicle if the lead escaped. It was dismissed publicly as insurgent activity. Internally, a quiet investigation began. The second attempt came weeks later. A captain stationed in the east was arrested for transmitting coded messages to an external contact. Under interrogation, he revealed the outlines of a plan. During a military exercise, a live round would be substituted in a ceremonial salute. The accident would be blamed on miscommunication. It was crude, but it proved one thing: the rot was deeper than anyone suspected. Traoré summoned the intelligence chiefs. The State Security Directorate, Burkina Faso's shadowy intelligence body, was granted sweeping authority. Within days, dozens of officers were reassigned, interrogated, or sent into early retirement. Then came the third attempt. This one nearly worked. On a humid night in early 2025, Traoré was scheduled to hold a closed-door meeting with his inner circle in a villa near the presidential palace. A trusted officer, one of his earliest supporters during the 2022 coup, arrived early, carrying a sealed briefcase meant for the captain. Inside it was a bottle of imported honey, a delicacy from abroad. Traoré never opened it. One of his bodyguards, a former field medic, noticed the seal had been tampered with. He insisted it be tested. The results were chilling. The honey had been laced with thallium, a slow-acting poison that mimics food poisoning in early stages. It would have killed him over the course of 48 hours, likely too late for any antidote to be effective. The officer who delivered it vanished the same night. He was later found near the Ghanaian border, dead. 2 gunshots to the chest, another to the head, execution style. The investigation turned inward once more. What emerged was no longer a theory. It was a conspiracy. Multiple cells, some military, some civilian, had coordinated over months to isolate, destabilize, and ultimately eliminate Traoré. Intelligence suggested at least one faction had ties to former members of the Damiba government. Others had connections to foreign advisors stationed in Ouagadougou under the banner of diplomatic assistance. Some members of the conspiracy had been quietly meeting in private homes in the capital. The meetings were short. Phones were left behind. Messages were passed by courier. Promises were made. Once Traoré was dead, a caretaker council would take over, restore relations with the West, and bring back order. The idea wasn't just to kill a man, it was to kill the revolution. By May 2025, Traoré had had enough. Standing before his council of ministers, he spoke without notes. His tone was cold, controlled. "There have been attempts," he said, "to physically eliminate me, attempts to assassinate your head of state. Some of those responsible are still among us." The room fell silent. Later that week, a televised address was made. Traoré looked tired but unshaken. He said only this: "The enemies of Burkina Faso are not just in the bush. They are in our own homes, our own offices, our own uniforms. But I assure you, they will not win." He never named names. But arrests began almost immediately. 5 senior officers were taken into custody. A well-known businessman with ties to Western import-export companies was placed under house arrest. A foreign intelligence officer was quietly expelled. Burkina Faso's diplomatic circles went into lockdown. Inside the country, reactions were mixed. Some called it paranoia. Others saw it as confirmation that Traoré's government was under siege from within. But the people, especially in the rural north and central provinces, rallied behind him. Protests erupted in his favor. Citizens marched with signs bearing slogans like "Hands off our revolution" and "The people stand with the captain." Traoré did not attend these rallies. He remained behind the walls of the presidential compound, protected, increasingly isolated, but still in command. His security was doubled. His movements became unpredictable. Meetings were scheduled hours before they happened. Only a small circle of guards, men he had fought beside in the north, were allowed to be near him unarmed. He trusted almost no one now. The AES alliance responded swiftly. From Bamako, Mali's Colonel Assimi Goïta issued a firm statement. "An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. We stand with the Burkinabe people and their leader." In Niamey, Niger's General Tiani offered similar support, denouncing neo-colonial agents who sought to undo the region's progress. Together, the AES launched joint counterintelligence operations. Foreign influence, they declared, would be rooted out of the Sahel. not by words, but by force, if necessary. But Traoré knew this was only the beginning. He had learned a lesson all revolutionary leaders must eventually face. The first battle is to seize power. The harder one is keeping it, without losing your soul. Each night as he reviewed security reports, he thought of Thomas Sankara, the martyred Burkinabe leader who had tried in the 1980s to chart a similar path. Sankara had been killed in a coup. His killers had worn the same uniforms, spoken the same language. Traoré's eyes would linger on Sankara's portrait, framed above his desk. He did not need to be reminded of how the story could end. But unlike Sankara, Traoré had survived his first real conspiracy, for now.